Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our viewers on Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Jesse is here, and he's digitally recording this in high definition for a later broadcast on their website and also on your public access channel. And for those of you on Charter, it's 985, and Solaris, it's Channel 3. And the reason why he's here, Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is holding his first post-election listening session on the radio with you, and we'll open up the phone lines later, but we welcome the newly re-elected mayor of Wisconsin Rapids, Zach Vruwink. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Carl, and good morning to our listeners.
Congratulations are in order to you and also to the new council members who took their oaths of office, and also Paul Shabilsky, the city clerk. Mm-hmm. Might as well get your reaction to being re-elected. Some folks were a little surprised by they thought the election was a little closer than what they thought, and I guess your message, will give you a little inaugural time for a message not only to your supporters but to all the citizens, and especially I think I'll let you a chance to reach out to those who voted against you.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, 2 weeks ago we had our first snowstorm of April, right? And it really impacted turnout, no question. Our turnout was down. I think in my 3 previous runs, I had garnered nearly 3,000 votes every time. In this last run, well under 1,500, around 1,500, right? So less than 3,000. There were 3,000 fewer voters this spring election for the mayoral race than there were in the previous 3 elections. So definitely turnout was down and brought the election very close, I think, too. But certainly, I appreciate the challenge and the opportunity to talk about differences of ideas and opinions throughout the campaign, and appreciative that it was a very civil campaign. I felt by and large, there was some negativity throughout, but I felt I wanted to keep a very clean and very positive message. It's simple. It's what are our ideas for improving the city of Wisconsin Rapids, and I believe carrying a positive message and an optimistic message around what's realistic for our community and what are those challenges that face us, and how do we individually wish to address them. And last night, I expressed my appreciation to outgoing alderpersons Todd Ferke and Greg Hepp and Terry Dolan for their service, as well as the welcoming of 3 new alderpersons and Tom Rayom, who was unopposed, who also won re-election this last spring. So we've got some new faces and some new energy on the council. I look forward to having those folks join us and our agenda and initiatives to, I believe they all have the best interests of the city in mind. I don't think there's any hidden agendas there, which is exciting, because you never know with folks that may want to run. They have a beef with a city department or against an initiative, but I believe by and large they want the best for the city, and that's very exciting.
Your goals for your 4th 2-year term in office?
Well, our primary goal is, while city government doesn't create jobs, and I think it's really difficult for me to communicate that to residents who believe that the mayor's primary role is to bring business to the community. Well, I don't just go to a store and buy business and then I take it off the shelf and bring it to the community, right? City government has to set the table, and that's our role. And really, if we want to create jobs, we have to create government jobs. And many people who are fiscal hawks or don't believe the city should be spending on various initiatives, well, the city isn't going to create jobs that way, nor is the mayor, right? So really trying to continue to focus efforts on diversification of the economy. We know that we need to have a broader economic base in the city in order for our community to economically thrive. That reliance on a single sector and a single industry, while it got us here and will continue to carry forward in a main sense, in a primary sense, we still need to continue to support other firms that represent different economic bases, whether it's in ed technology, which is Renaissance Learning, or many of the smart startups, the small businesses that we don't talk about on air. And I think that's what's exciting to me is we continue to market our business park assets, and we continue to market our community as a place for business. And so that's one thing I'm looking forward to, is just continuing to work with prospective businesses on locating in our community, fully realizing that the city doesn't exercise the power, nor do they make the decision for the business on where to locate. But we do need to continue to maintain our infrastructure, because that's ultimately what attracts business to community. If you're talking large business, and we don't engage in a lot of attraction efforts, because attraction is very costly. And if residents, again, are fiscally conservative or don't believe that the city should be investing in certain attraction efforts, we're not going to land those business enterprises that we're looking to bring to our community. So it's a matter of growing from within and working with our Chamber of Commerce and working with other economic development entities. Mid-State's now becoming a much more broader player as they've added staff and resources and economic development efforts. So I'm looking forward to partnerships in those regard, because I think, part of the challenge with a 2-year term is the relationship building and the amount of effort that goes into understanding kind of our community and the assets that we have. But now, having been in office for a couple of terms, it gives me an opportunity to really leverage and make the most of what I know and the relationships that I've built over the long haul. So I believe that it's an exciting time for me to really bring the maturity of the office to various business efforts, attraction and recruitment, and as well as retention. I mean, we don't talk a lot about retention on air, but I believe we can't forget about the businesses that are here, because if we don't retain those, that's a bigger battle to fight and to win if you're trying to retain a business that has been here and may want to leave for a particular reason.
The city's been involved in a number of projects, from the Aquatic Center, Triangle Project, the Riverfront, etc. What are your priorities with those going forward?
Well, we knew when we were designing the Aquatic Center, number one, the community told us by and large they wanted a pool. They wanted a public swimming facility outdoors for residents to enjoy. And when we went through that process, we knew that we couldn't just build a tank pool, which they're just not built today, right? So the cost for more of a recreational center, aquatic center, was to the tune of $8 to $10 million. And here we are raising money for nearly a $10 million aquatics facility. At the same time, other community projects and capital campaigns are going on. So we knew it would be very difficult to raise money in a time when others were raising money for various capital campaigns, whether it's the YMCA Boys and Girls Club project, the Cultural Center's capital campaign, which they're getting underway. And I think those things just take time. And now we've got a design finished on the Aquatic Center development. We can reshare that out with the community and educate the residents about what that facility truly is, what it truly costs, and what it's going to cost to operate. We've gotten, as time has gone on, we did more analysis of that facility to ensure that we could afford it ultimately. Number one, the capital to construct it, but also the operating costs, that we weren't saddling taxpayers with a big burden when it comes to operations. And so I'm excited to be able to now share that message around the Aquatic Center development. Essentially, our plan remains unchanged. We're still in the hunt for $4 million in donations to begin construction for that facility. And we believe once people understand all of what that facility offers, whether it's summertime recreation, obviously with the pool and the other aquatics amenities, but also the wintertime recreation, that in the design, we prioritized hockey and other ice skating the venues within the existing design without any additional cost, right? So by building the Aquatic Center, we're also going to get a number of wintertime features. And in a time like this, when we've got kind of a perpetual winter, it feels, we need to have facilities that are very cost effective, but also offer residents value throughout the calendar year. And so I think, achieving the Aquatic Center development remains my top priority. I look forward to 2020 when my term is up. That'll be the 100th year that Wisconsin Rapids was known as Wisconsin Rapids. The two cities merged in 2020 to become 1920 to become Wisconsin Rapids. And I think about a major celebration. By that time, we'll have the YMCA Boys and Girls Club open and the redevelopment of the mall. Our hope is that we'll have shovels in the ground on the Triangle project, which the city was obviously, as you alluded to earlier, entered into real estate space to grow the economy downtown, and really for the benefit of all the city as we try to grow the tax base. I know a lot of these things have become, a little bit of concern amongst residents. It's great they're asking questions, but ultimately we're here to grow the economy, and there are certain levers and buttons we can push to do that, other things we can't do. And sometimes it's a matter of acquiring real estate, like we've done with business parks, when we've established our business parks, or in the case of downtown, where we've acquired property for housing and other commercial developments. So that's really what I'm looking forward to seeing. 2020 is my marker. What are we going to be able to look over the course of 100 years, as we were known as Wisconsin Rapids, and all the various projects and initiatives that were created and ultimately were successful in the community.
What about the triangle? When are we expecting to get like some kind of design from the developer who's currently working on the project?
The real big question is, how much of the property are we looking to redevelop? Are we looking to only develop what we own, or are we looking to redevelop the entire thing? And until we get to a point with acquisition that we can feel confident in developing the entire thing, we're not going to put a design out there. That was a development that happened in the last month, that we hope to acquire the entire site. We've got 2 property owners that we don't have any site control with yet. And until we get to that point, we're not going to put a design out there, because it ultimately will change should we acquire those other properties. Nor do we want to spend any money, or does the developer want to spend any money designing something. The big question is how much of the footprint of that site can handle underground parking, because the amount of underground parking that's available will drive how many units are available in a residential basis, and it'll also drive how much commercial space can be held. A lot of commercial tenants want street parking of some form, but they also want parking at the front door. And so those are things that, until we figure out how much of that site ultimately are we going to own or control, or the developer is going to be able to have to develop, we're not going to put a design out there.
So what does that do with the timeline? When do you think you could acquire all of the property that you need, or what? I'm trying to get an idea.
Just negotiations are still ongoing with the 2 property owners.
Okay.
One of them has said when we, as soon as you acquire the first, which is 4 Stools, the real estate that bar sits on, the other property owner is certainly ready to sell. So it's been negotiating and discussing with the owners of the other properties, because ultimately that drives the look and the feel and the footprint of the development.
So those negotiations are continuing.
That's right. And, there's so much excavation that'll have to happen on the site to get down to a point where we can have underground parking. So there's a lot of things at play. We could, the bar in one scenario, the businesses could continue to operate for a period of time, maybe a year or longer, based upon different development schedules of the site. So, there's a lot of dynamics to work through there. And the challenge is a public sector entity, how much we can obviously talk about on air, of course, because we don't own the property.
Who does the negotiating for the city besides yourself as the chief executive officer?
Our city attorney would be the other person that would be involved in exchanging proposals. We've talked with the developer about having them accomplish the site acquisition themselves, so it's not the city buying the property, that it's actually the developer buying the rest of the property, and that's certainly an option that we're looking at right now. Okay.
Well, we had that major blizzard.
Yeah.
20 inches.
Mm-hmm.
First off, how did it affect the city? It looks like the city is okay. None the worse for, but it does a mess on streets. It causes problems with overtime and street work. The cleanup and everything else. Any idea of how expensive this storm was?
We don't have any numbers in yet, because the numbers do lag a couple of days, and we're only a couple of days from it, and we're still doing a lot of snow removal as we speak in the downtown area and in city parking lots and the like. So we won't have final costs, but we do know that because we brought in folks on Saturday and Sunday, that it was a costly event. That was a blessing that we didn't disrupt daily lives during the work week on a Monday or a Tuesday. Let's say if the storm came on a Monday through Friday. So the blessing was that it came over the weekend. The downside of that is we had to call folks in, and a lot of folks, whether there were a number of folks that were out of town, some that were on scheduled vacations. So availability of manpower was a concern because it happened over the weekend. But we don't have any preliminary numbers as of now. We do know it was a very expensive storm because of just the sheer volume. Think about how many times we had to pass through residential streets, and having 151 lane miles in the city or something like that. It's a costly adventure when you've got to plow residential streets multiple times. The arterials, we always plan to keep those open, so that's something we're always going to be running multiple passes on the the arterials, right, whether they're 54, 8th Street, or 34, or even West Grand, those arterials we want to keep open during the storm, so those will run regularly. But definitely the sheer volume of that storm and the nature when it came, it tested us, and it tested our equipment. And there was a new piece of equipment that we got that actually blew up. The engine blew on it, and it had 20-some hours on it. And so fortunately, the warranty was still in existence. But boy, does that put a damper on how quickly we can respond to the storm and how quickly we can remove snow.
Okay, so one of the questions we got, someone left me, is what is going on? Are you going to adjust the schedule for the yard waste pickup as a result of all of that?
That's our plan. I haven't heard an updated schedule on that. I know there was some questions around garbage and recycling schedule, and that's all remained on schedule. But yeah, we believe that we're going to adjust the yard waste pickup just surely because most of it's under snow, right?
Right.
And I don't think our compost sites certainly aren't going to be opening anytime soon. But I think with the sunlight the way it is this spring and the warmer temperatures, hopefully that snow cover will go fairly quickly.
And if you're just joining us on the Morning Magazine, welcome. It's our monthly visit with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink.
That's another point on the snow. One concern folks have asked me, and I'll mention it on air, is because of the amount of ice that's on lakes up north in the Wisconsin River watershed,
right.
and the amount of snow cover that they also received. While I say we want it to go quickly, we don't want it to go too quick because that could really create some flooding concerns.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because out of Green Bay, on the National Weather Service in Green Bay, and its hazardous weather outlook for Thursday through Tuesday, it says rivers and streams across the area will be on the rise through this weekend into much of next week. So, and I understand that a lot of the flowages they've lowered them as much as they reasonably can in anticipation of the deluge that's going to be coming.
That's right. You drive over the Dubay area and through Knowlton area, you can definitely see Dubay is drawn down quite a bit, and hopefully those flowages will be able to capture. That's kind of how they control the flow of the river, right? They lower them and then obviously can control the flow out. But yeah, the dam operators, it's amazing to see the coordination between all of those entities on the Wisconsin River. Obviously, we're very concerned having a dam on the north end of our city and the south end. We happen to be, right in the ground zero in some respects for that.
Okay. Well, like I said, a nice gradual melt with no heavy rainfall. Yeah. That's the other problem. If you get heavy rainfall with the snow melt, then you're in real big trouble. Last night was the reorganization of the Common Council, and Alderman Kubishek is your new council president?
Was elected as council president, correct.
Okay, and we should mention the role of the council president. So I like to do a little tutorial on local government when I talk to elected officials. What is the role of the Common Council president?
Well, it's really a fairly informal role. The council president may step in the case that I'm unable to preside over a meeting due to illness or a scheduled conflict. So that person could run a Common Council meeting in the event that I cannot. The other role that they have is to call a committee of the whole. So while we have 3 committees of the council, they could call a committee of the whole to discuss a particular issue. Generally, there's no action that comes out of that meeting. It's a recommendation maybe to a particular committee. So there's that role as well. So it's a fairly informal role. They get a small stipend for serving as a council president. I guess somebody has to do the role. And I think for me, it's more of a conduit for communication. I had sent Alderperson Kubishak a note this morning around maybe some training and some other education we can offer the council on various Robert's Rules of Order and how we conduct our meetings, since we've got 3 new members that haven't, 2 of which have not been around government much, or the meeting process. One obviously is seasoned from his experience in the city clerk's office. So that's really the gist of the city council president role.
Yeah, we should mention Shane Blazer, the former city clerk, is a new alderperson. So we welcome him back.
Unopposed as well. Yeah, there were three of the 4 ran unopposed in districts, which isn't uncommon, I guess, in my time.
Yeah, and it's a sign of the times. So that's why we appreciate those that are willing to serve.
That's right.
Want to get into they upheld. Well, first off, why don't we? Do you have the list of the chairpersons that were elected?
I do. Yeah, I just made a note of them. I didn't bring my note, but I think I've got them. So the Human Resources Committee is chaired by Alderperson Steve Koth. Also on the Human Resources Committee is Scott Kellogg and Joe Zerflu. The Public Works Committee is chaired by Tom Rayom, and Lee Graff, and Alderperson Thad Kubishak is also on the Public Works Committee. The Finance and Property Committee is chaired by Joe Zerflu, with Jake Katnaugh and Shane Blazer also on that committee.
Okay, so those are the committees, and like we always tell folks, when you're dealing with an issue that you are interested in, that's where you can have the most input, is when the committee is doing the groundwork.
That's right. That's actually where the discussion is had, right? People watch the council meeting and they say, well, why don't they discuss the issue? Well, oftentimes the committees are where it's discussed, especially when there's other alderpersons that are present. So the committee runs the meeting, or the chair runs the meeting, and the committee obviously takes action. But there are times where alderpersons ask questions, offer input at the committee level, and it's really a productive system, because if we think about council meetings, and I've talked to some former council members just recently that had served our city, and I think it's really important to know that our council meetings don't run 3 or 4 hours long, because the committee process is really productive, in that regard.
Okay, and then yes, you had the unfinished business with your veto of the ordinance amending certain sections of the municipal code regarding temporary residential sale of agricultural products. First off, I want to compliment the council and you. I thought the discussion was very civil. Mm-hmm. Valid points were made. There were no insults traded. There was no high emotion. It was just basically, here's my side, here's how I view it, or here's what I'm hearing from my constituency. But in the end, it was a 5-3 vote to override, which is one vote short of the required margin, 6 votes to override. But even those that were wanting to override were saying that the ordinance was too broad, mm-hmm. and they wanted a chance to tinker with it. Now, after the vote, I guess there's been a referral.
That's right.
And a referral made. Mm-hmm. So where are we going with this issue?
Well, as it was stated last night, this ordinance change comes as a result of one individual, one resident, who wishes to sell pumpkins during the fall harvest season in their front yard. And there was a complaint. There had been a complaint generated because the ordinance does not allow for the sale of agricultural products, or any products really, in a residential district, and for good reason, right? We've got, the streets are narrower, there's not parking oftentimes, or the visibility is different than it is in commercial districts. Not to mention that the city has a very liberal farm stand and farm market regulation. If you want to set up a farm stand on A Street, by all means, you fill out an application, you get your permit, boom, you can go sell on 8th Street, or in any other commercial district for that matter. So this ordinance would change all of the residential districts could allow the sale of agricultural products. And for me, residents had called me with very deep concerns about it was, well, what is the definition of agricultural products? Well, technically, it's anything that's either grown on a farm or produced in an agricultural setting. So one could say, well, I want to sell milk, I want to sell cheese, I want to sell meat, I want to sell anything else that's connected to the ag industry in my residence. And so I felt that it definitely had ramifications from a standpoint of health, safety, and welfare, and felt it was way too broad. I mean, cities and government should not be legislating for one individual, right? We've got to make policy that applies in a very sensible fashion to the entire population. And if they wanted to allow the sale of pumpkins, which is really what the discussion centered around, not the sale of Christmas trees, not the sale of any other agricultural product, then maybe they need to create a carve-out or some allowance for that to occur. But to just go from this non-sale of anything, flip the ordinance to allow the sale of anything, you're going to make as Alderperson Colt talked about, we've got property maintenance issues across the city, and you're going to make a bad situation worse because our single ordinance control officer now is going to be looking for violations or potentially enforcement related to agricultural sales. And it's a bad deal all the way around, and I'm appreciative that 3 of the members of the council said, let's let the veto stand, let's come back with another product. The other 5 members felt that, as I understood, that this was appropriate. They maybe said differently, but they voted ultimately to allow the sale of agricultural products in residential districts.
I think, from my standpoint, as a city resident and taxpayer, that is too broad, because agricultural products. I mean, someone could, like it was mentioned in a previous debate about this, someone could start selling sheep or farm animals.
That's right.
If they wanted to.
And I think, if you're a realtor and you're looking to sell property in the city, or if you're a homeowner looking to buy or sell, having an ordinance like that really creates a major unknown, because conceivably you could have everyone apply for the permit, and for 60 days out of the year, for 60 out of the 360, they could be selling a particular product, and certainly they could bring other products there too. So, I think it's a good time for the council to. But you're right; it was very civil, and I was in my comments to the council last night. Is I hope we can continue a tradition of professionalism and civility on the council. And I think as when I was growing up and watching council meetings or being at a meeting myself, they were a little less civil than they are today.
Yes, I can remember sometimes in the old days where it got really ugly and very unprofessional, and where people are calling people names and the like. And I don't think that is. And I'm going back there. I'm going back to when all of those chairs were filled with alderpersons, and was Wheatley. I mean. Talk about long meetings.
Yeah, right. I ran into Maynard Patrick recently, and he was reminiscing a little bit about those times when there were so many blocks and separation of opinions. And
then you get long meetings and get people tired and they get angry, and it's not a productive system.
Unfortunately, the city council, I find, still lives in a little bit of that perception that folks, they know that the mayor can't do things on their own. They need the city council approval generally for various initiatives and programs. And, I hear publics come up to me and say, the city council, you're working well. Fortunately, the city council is very sensible by and large, and I think they care about the issues and pay attention. So, and they're civil, which is
I think that the key to that then is contact your alderperson and talk to them in a civil way and say, I have these concerns.
And I think it's important for alderpersons. A lot of times alderpersons hear from constituents when they're opposed to something.
Right.
But they need to get a call when they've voted in favor of something that you support. A lot of times that they while they're representative of their district, they don't necessarily have to vote their district. They're just elected by their district. So I think some believe that their residents called and 5 said this and 3 said that. Well, this is the way I need to vote on the issue. Well, that's really not how representative democracy works. And, I hate to be the person to say that, but that's the fact. And so I think it's remind listeners that if they, see an issue that passed the council, they should call or send their council member an email or a note and recognize them.
I agree with that. With that, we have to take our first break. You're listening to The Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends, our buddy Jesse from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. They're digitally recording this in high definition for viewing on their excellent website, as well as on Charter Channel 985 and Solaris Channel 3. The reason Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here for his monthly update. With the changes in governance up and down the beautiful Wisconsin River, you're now the Dean of Mayors.
I found myself in that role. It's quite a surprise.
And actually, I guess you're going to be the topic of a Wisconsin Public Radio program involving this. So what's it like to be a young dean?
I was surprised. I feel like I entered the office without too many grays. I've got a few more grays now, but not that it's a bad thing, but it does wear on you a little bit. But we have, I understand, tomorrow morning the mayors of Rhinelander and Merrill, who are newly elected. The Merrill mayor is now, I believe, the youngest mayor in Wisconsin. He's 25. And myself, having been elected at 24 and now serving for 6 years, we're going to be on a topic tomorrow I want to talk about mayoral leadership. And each community is a little bit different, so I'm not sure exactly how Glenn Moberg, the host of the radio show, was going to take the issue, but we understand we're going to be answering questions about elected office and how we how we have governed, or in those guys' cases, how they plan to govern. And so I'm interested to hear what the discussion is. But yeah, I look around me, and the mayor of Marshfield didn't seek re-election this last time. Chris served for over 10 years up there. Mayor Halverson and now Mayor Wiesa in Stevens Point. Mayor Wiesa's been around for, I believe, 3 years now, and then thinking about Mayor Milkey in Wausau, who's in his, I think, second or third year. So yeah, found myself one of the more senior mayors in our area, which is kind of exciting. It's neat to see neat to see turnover. It's good that folks recognize the opportunity for others. Whether they lost or whether they decided to step aside on their own. It's neat to see others, especially younger folks, stepping up to the plate.
Among the projects that you have been working on is to update the way the city presents itself, especially, and your generation knows this better than my generation, online. Mm-hmm. So can you give us a little update on what's going to be happening? Because that came up during the campaign as well. How are we presenting the city of Wisconsin Rapids online? And if a business person needs to get in contact with somebody, is it easy to do so? If they need to get a permit for something, is it easy to do so? Can you give us an update, sir?
Well, a little bit of background. 6 years ago, we took a look at all of the things that the city presents itself online and those that were not online. So we really began an emphasis to get permitting and a lot of the self-service options available online. So if you're a realtor or if you're a property owner and you want to know information about property tax bills or parcel information, we have all of that information now online, and it was not inexpensive and it was not an easy process, but it took us some time. And so now we have a very robust geographic information system, a GIS system, which is very commonplace for cities around the country now to have. So people can self-service, look up tax bill information, look up parcel information, ownership information, as well as pay property taxes online, pay ambulance bills online, and they can also pull permits online. But the one thing that we didn't get to in the last 6 years, and I'm pleased to say that we're a matter of weeks away from launching, is what generally people, a general resident may go to the city website. And the city website was the last portion of that whole push. So now we're in the final phases and final stretch of launching a new city website, which has, it's very clean, it's very user-friendly, it's bright, but it also should be very simple, that if folks want to get access and information on yard waste pickup, for example, it shouldn't take them 5 minutes to figure out how to do that. And our current website is very cumbersome, and I appreciate the discussion during the campaign because it isn't ideal and it's very outdated. So I believe we're going to have a much better product out there for when residents are looking for information.
Is it going to be
not to mention businesses.
Is it going to be mobile based?
It is, and we did launch. People can check it out today. So if anyone has a smartphone app or a smartphone that is a listener, can go to their app store if they're on Apple or if they're on an Android product and search for City of Wisconsin Rapids. You'll actually be able to download a mobile application that has a fresh face. It's got access if people want to report property maintenance issues, cars parked on the front lawn, if there's property maintenance, code violations, things like that, all can be reported. Sidewalks not being shoveled, any other issues, potholes, those all can be reported via the smartphone app. So I'd encourage listeners that do have a smartphone to download the City of Wisconsin Rapids app. We just launched it in the last 60 days, but it's ready for prime time. We just haven't marketed it very well until we get the new website launched to go along with it. Okay.
Now, with, like I said, everything being delayed, but we got some good news yesterday from the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA of a nice donation to their project. So what are you hearing about what's going to be happening with that in terms of the start of it?
Well, it's very exciting to see major lead gifts come forward to support the project, right? And I think the neat part is, provided their last leg of fundraising goes well, which is under $1 million of kind of smaller community donations, they're positioned really well to break ground this summer. There's already been work going on with that project. The removal of the gas tanks that were previously on the property where the gas station was, as well as the car wash infrastructure when that had burned burnt down, so that removal was taking place prior to the storm, and now can get resumed after the storm has taken place. We've also gotten word that we're likely to get a state grant that the city had applied for to support the project, so we'll be announcing that as soon as we get final word. But certainly their fundraising has gone really well. And I think it's really a testament to having a vision and saying, you know what, we can serve the youth and family and senior population of our community better by operating in a single facility that brings the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA together. And as I shared last week when we did the ribbon cutting formally at the grand opening of Wheeler's, Wheeler's investment here on the far west side of West Grand and the mall redevelopment on the east end of West Grand really primes that corridor for redevelopment. Not instantly. It's not going to change overnight. But as new activity happens and new traffic and new housing developments occur, there's going to be more commercial activity in those areas. So back to the Boys and Girls Club. Tonight we're having a joint meeting as a member of the Boys and Girls Club board myself. We're having a joint meeting to talk about next steps of the project. And I'm very excited because the project has gone as they'd expected it. They were really in a capital fundraising campaign in some form for a lot of years as they were looking at multiple sites in the city. When before Aspirus acquired Riverview Hospital, they were looking at that site, and then they were looking at the 54 and Chestnut property to the south of the Aspirus Doctors Clinic, and then obviously when a number of us said, if it can happen, the mall and the downtown redevelopment really would be a great thing, and fortunately that is coming closer and closer to fruition. So, it's exciting to see that they'll likely have shovels in the ground this year and get construction underway. I think it's important for our listeners to remember the mall, while a portion of the mall will be demolished, there will remain a lot of property there for commercial or other redevelopment. The YMCA is actually a small portion of the entire property that the Y owns. So that's an exciting thing that while we're going to lose the mall, we're going to gain so much other property for redevelopment.
What about the old steel foundry just down the road a little bit? What's happening with that?
Well, we're still in discussions with them. They're still winding down their operations on the east side, their other foundry over there. So on Oliver Street on the west side here, we're in discussions with them because we know it's not going to operate as a foundry again. And frankly, with the new YMCA Boys and Girls Club and a fairly recent senior housing development next door to that, we want to make sure that site's clean and represents a good step forward or path forward for that property. So we're going to be discussing with them. I know they were working on a sale, and I understand that they may have gone a different direction. So we're excited because they're receptive to working with the city on getting the site cleaned up and ultimately getting it ready for redevelopment.
What about down the road, the proposal for the residential housing that would be, nice homes?
That's right.
Nice homes. Request for proposals from developers. Where is that at?
So we extended the deadline. In short, I signed the letter this morning. It'll be going back out to builders and developers. We did extend the time. Launching it in the spring when developers had their pipelines full was not necessarily was not really a good time. So we're gonna continue to keep that process open for applicants. But the other feedback we got was the size of the development was too small. A lot of the builders want to develop larger pieces of property. That we're expecting only to have about 12 homes on it, and developers said, we want to do 40 to 50 single-family homes in a shot. So we're actually working with one of the interested parties on some property the city owns about putting in some nice city lots on the east side of town. So we did get some interest from developers on that RFP, but at this point there is no proposed there is no proposals for the city to consider on that property, but we're excited because there was interest. It was just too small for those that became interested.
So is that maybe going to hamper that development?
There is property across 25th Avenue, south of Alton Street, some with some wetlands, but there is some of that's buildable, and it's not developed today. The city doesn't own it, so we're going to continue to talk with those parties to let them know that if there's a small city-owned property and a larger non-city-owned property, that maybe it would become attractive to a builder to do homes of scale than just the city property on its own.
Okay, and that's why the Triangle project, I understand, is such an important one, because the housing component in it.
That's right.
And let's refresh everybody. What kind of housing we're talking about.
Yeah, all of these kind of complement each other. There's not so much in a single class. We've had over the course of 10, 15 years, a lot of senior housing development in the city, and I see that slowing. We actually don't have a single project besides the one that's proposed by the Centralia Center. We don't have a single project that's really come before the city for senior housing. So I believe the market need has been met, especially with the opening of the 2 Mile property on 2 Mile, which is adjacent to Arborwood, which is more senior apartments and senior housing. I think that market is pretty well covered. And that was reflected in our housing study that we did, that we shouldn't expect any major senior housing developments come forward to the city. But where we do see the need and continue to see the need is in single-family construction, new construction in the $175,000 to $250,000 range. The 3 and 4 bedroom, 2 to 3 bath type thing. Our housing stock just is not flush with that type of product. So that's what obviously the 25th and Alton property came about, was we really wanted to press on that segment of the market because those are generally families and individuals working in our community or looking to work in our community, but are having to buy down in the town of Rome or buy in the town of Grand Rapids. So we wanted to create that option, make that option available in the city. And then we continue to see interest in the multifamily rental housing. And I think it comes as a result of the housing study really calling out that a lot of our single family homes that were either converted from single to duplexes or just converted to rental units, the quality of those units was not in the A classification. It was in the B and the C, as well as a number of the existing single family or multifamily housing developments. So we actually have another project coming before the city for rezoning here in a couple of weeks. It's the property across from the Wood County Highway Department, and so there's a developer that looks to develop that with multifamily housing and a large number of units and quite a significant investment. So from our standpoint, where those rooftops and new housing developments happen in our community really drives the commercial district. And because so much development happened on the east side and the far east outside the city, that's why we saw A Street really grow. So we're excited about just the interest in the west side or even getting housing units downtown. When you asked about the Triangle property, that if we can get certain incomes and certain housing developments to occur in various parts of our town, it will drive or really stimulate the commercial activity, whether it's on West Grand or even downtown. So that's an exciting point. I mean, it's part of the whole equation. You need to have new rooftops and people living in those homes and units with certain incomes to be able to drive the commercial.
One of the projects that's coming up or is in, I guess you might even have to have a special meeting of the council, involves the plan lift station, the upgrade here on this side of the river for our sewer system.
That's right. So the river crossing is 60, 70 years old. And
that's old.
It is very old. And for an asset to last that long, I mean, it goes to show that we maintained it, but also we've got to prepare for its replacement. So the city council is actually going to be meeting on the 1st of May to consider a clean water fund loan, which would essentially allow us to afford the replacement. And this goes to wastewater rates. So folks are wondering, how are we paying for it? It's really out of the wastewater utility. So it's the replacement of the river crossing, which crosses just south of the state office building and connects up by Blue Heron Lane and then goes along Pepper Ave up to the wastewater treatment plant. So that river crossing, it's not the whole length of it. It's purely where the crossing of the river occurs. So that's actually going to be bored through the bedrock, which is a pretty interesting engineering tactic to bore a line through the bedrock in the river and then come up on the other side. And the other portion of that project is the lift station. And that lift station is what all of the west side collection, all of the sewer lines can converge on one single point by the zoo. And that asset was built in the 40s. And it's a pretty cool building, and we hope to retain the building for some other use. But the lift station will actually be moved out of that building just south of there by the zoo. And so that'll collect all the waste and send it through that pipeline across the river.
Okay. We got a call, so why don't we get our listener on and talk to their mayor, and then I got some questions for you about the reorganization of the Wood County Board yesterday. There's some news made. Why don't you put on your headset, sir, so we can... okay, you're on the Morning Magazine. Your question or comment?
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Al.
Hey, Al. What's up?
Hi. Yeah, I called a while back. You know when the Dunkin' Donuts will be coming? And then not they coming to town no more.
They still are. We've seen site plans from them, but they're still working through corporate on the approval of the site plan. So we believe
It don't seem like they're looking on it, but whatever they do, I guess.
Well, part of it is weather, and being able to get forms and footings in the ground. And I think, the building is quite small. It's about 1,000 square feet. But we believe that's still a go, and we haven't heard otherwise that they're not.
Coming soon, huh?
Yes.
Where is it going to be? Thank you, Al. Where is it going to be located?
The site plan, as it's been proposed, is across from McDonald's in front of the former Furniture Plus location, just south of Pizza Hut.
A lot of people are very interested in getting Dunkin' Donuts, and it's amazing how people are fans of various franchises.
They are, yeah. That always amazes me. I personally don't spend a lot of time or a lot of money through fast food or franchises, but occasionally I do, and I know a lot of people are very, they're popular things.
Okay. As we diversify this economy, what are we going? What do you see happening with retail? That was another issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, the big boxes are. We just found out. Hey, Shopko is. Not Shopko, but Yonkers. Mm-hmm. His history. The one in Plover and whatever.
Marshfield.
Yeah. They're all going. They had already closed here, but now the rest of them are gone. And again, online retailing. Mm-hmm. Online retailing is not going away.
Right.
And so, what does that mean in terms of planning for the economy of the future in the city of Wisconsin Rapids?
Well, I think overall, whether it's retail or even economic development, it's far less place-based. People think, let's get a business to locate in our jurisdictional boundary, and that's just not the case. I mean, when corporations and companies, even like Renaissance Learning, who sends a lot of their sales team and some of their support staff to be able to work from home, those folks can live anywhere and work for that company, right? They don't have to be in Wisconsin Rapids area anymore. So it's a concern because it definitely changes our outlook and how we approach economic development. And the same goes for retail, right? If you can have something delivered to your door in a day or 2 days from Amazon Prime, that's not going away. Consumers are going to continue to drive that, and unfortunately it plays out in local elections because it brings up at a point of, well, I want to get retail to move back to the community. Retailers are not building anymore. I mean, they're doing very much more regional, localized. I mean, why Plover has grown is because they can service 3 or 4 communities. I mean, they can service almost 100,000 people by having a single store, whereas before they had to have a lot of retailers like a Yonkers, as you brought up, or others, had 2 or 3 stores in the region, or a JCPenney. Those days are gone, and they're not going to come back, I don't think, for the foreseeable future. But we have to, as a city, we need to continue to look at what are the emerging trends. You're seeing some small outlet type things pop up where not necessarily an outlet of a retailer, but just a very small store. I mean, personally, my preference still is to be able to, if you're talking about clothes or finished goods or shoes, you want to touch them and feel them and before you make that purchase. However, these companies are making it so easy to get it shipped to your door and for free returns in the mail. It's hard for retailers to compete against that. So I think we're going to continue to see a growth in small boutique retailers, locally owned, non-franchise retailers. We saw last year, I think almost 6 local boutiques open in the city. And those boutiques are bringing products to the market that are not available in a retail setting. And I also think they're a nice niche because there's really no online competition maybe for those same goods.
Local on First.
That's right. Local on First. I mean, Sweet Tea a couple of years ago, the Rustic Redefined, the Loot on Baker Street. I mean, there's a lot of unique little boutiques that have opened in our region as a whole. And I think that's going to continue to occur. It's not going to be your big boxes. And frankly, retail jobs are minimum wage jobs. And when people say we want good paying jobs, but then in the next breath they say they want retail, you can't win that argument because retail is going to bring minimum wage jobs and, it's not going to grow your economy.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on sales taxes does to this whole picture.
That's right. It equalizes and levels the playing field. And as a city leader, we want, particularly for the county, we want those sales taxes to come back to our county because that ultimately helps us afford the services that the county provides, of which the city is paying for a good portion of those county services.
Speaking of the county, Wood County, and a surprising move to many, by one vote, elected a new county board chairman. Lance Plimmel is no longer county board chairman. Your reaction? You had a good relationship.
Yeah, I swung by the meeting yesterday because I wanted to see, like our reorganization, who are going to be the players that I'm going to be working with. And yeah, I enjoyed a great relationship with Lance Plimmel, who I believe served as county board chair maybe for 18 years.
Yeah, something like that.
So quite a few years. Certainly look forward to working with now board chair Mahan, who's actually my district representative where I live. So I had known Doug for a while before, so I look forward to building a relationship with him. And and I think there's a lot of overlap. I always mention it because the city and the county, the cities do in this county pay a good portion of the county's taxes, right? And I think it's important for us to have a strong working relationship, to really put forth very city-friendly initiatives, because ultimately everyone wins. If new business and new tax-based growth happens in the cities, which is generally where the tax base is concentrated, rural taxpayers pay less. And that's one thing I'm excited about, is trying to communicate that vision that we need to grow our cities and the county, because that's ultimately going to keep the taxes and keep the tax base in check at the county level. And we ask them for concessions, right? When we have new projects that happen in the city, we create a downtown TIF, or we create a TIF in a business park to support a new business. The county and the school district and the technical college generally take a back seat. And I hope that attitude continues, because that's one of the few tools that cities have to incentivize new business growth and development.
And we should be noted, we have offered Mr. Mahan the same opportunity Mr. Plimmel had.
Great.
To be on once a month, and for my Pam told me he wants to do so, and it's just a matter of working out schedules, and we'll also be inviting our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media to be a part of that project as well, as we welcome him to his new position. Any final thoughts before I let you go?
It'd be kind of neat to have the newly elected mayor of Marshfield and the county board chair and I all on a similar program.
You're more than welcome. If you ever want to get your counterparts or whatever, we'll get more chairs.
All right. That sounds good, Carl. Thanks to you, and thanks to our listeners.
Okay. That's Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, and that's going to wrap up his monthly report here on the Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also want to thank our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media for being here. Jesse was here to make sure he got my good side. And you can view the program in its entirety on their very good website, as well as on various times on your local cable access channel. If you're on Charter, 985 Solaris HD channel 3 AM. That's going to do it for the Morning Magazine.